All right, welcome back, everyone. Apologies, we had a little ghost in the machine there, got it all worked out. We are in the home stretch. This is our last talk for today. So, everybody, do me a favor. I want you to stand up and shake it out. If you are in your office or you're at home or whatever, I don't care. Just loosen up a little bit. We got one more talk. It's going to be a good one. Our final presentation today is brought to us by our friends at AGC, featuring Sam Clark, Kimberly Waller, and Henry Nutt, featuring the E of RISE, which is equity. Too often, company leaders sit on the sidelines when it comes to developing strategic diversity, equity, and inclusion priorities, instead, allowing others to take the lead. But it's critical that company leaders actively engage in and model diversity, equity, and inclusion. Studies show that when leaders make these a priority, employees' sense of belonging nearly doubles. So, how can you model inclusive leadership behaviors to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion in your company? Through personal stories, tips, and best practices, this panel of experts will share how genuine leadership commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion can transform your company. Leading this conversation today will be Sam Clark, who continues the Clark Construction Company lineage as president and CEO, being the fourth to serve over the firm's 75 years. Kim Waller, who's a leader of Willis Towers Watson Diversity Solutions, a practice group focused on driving new organic growth through the power of diversity. Kim has helped design a new comprehensive framework based on a strategic change model to build inclusive cultures that enable organizations to better attract, develop, and retain people of color. And Henry Nutt, who serves as a pre-construction executive for Southland Industries. He's also the 2020 chair for AGC's National Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee and has served on the committee since its inception. Presenting today the value of leadership commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion success, please welcome Sam, Kim, and Henry.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are probably wondering what this white guy who grew up in a small town just west of Lansing is doing here talking to you all about diversity and inclusion. I'm going to share my story, my journey, and the results that we've had at our company. So in my small town, there was a lack of diversity, and it didn't seem like a problem to me at the time. We didn't feel like race was still an issue. We didn't feel like gender issues. These were things we dealt with in the past. Then I went to work in our company, and it was mostly white men. And again, I didn't see the problem with that. I just thought this is what white men are drawn to, and other people wanted to work in other roles. We did a survey during some strategic planning, and the results weren't that great. They were bad, actually. And there were a few comments about a boys' club and group think, and I was bothered by that. So I struck up a conversation with a woman in our company, and she said, "Yeah, Sam, it's a problem, but it's a problem everywhere, and there's not much you can do about it." And I wasn't very satisfied with that answer. And I know now that she just didn't want to take the time or the risk to try to explain something to me that I probably wasn't going to understand. So I went to California for a conference, and I met up with my cousin for a night, and I was talking to him about what had that conversation. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's white male culture." And I said, "White male what?" And he said, "Yeah, my company," he works for Lockheed Martin, sent me to this program called the White Man's Caucus, which is kind of a strange name, and it's named that way on purpose, intentionally. I said, "That sounds like a punishment." And he said, "Well, that's kind of what I thought, because I didn't feel like I had any issues. And I got there and I was wrong. It was a life-changing experience." And so after hearing what he had to say about it, I decided this was something I wanted to check out. So I went back to our office in Lansing and called them up and signed us up, myself and two other executives. And a few months later, we were in a small town in Illinois with a group of white men from around the country, learning about white male culture. And that was, for me, the key part of it. They taught us that we think of ourselves as individuals, not as a group. We see others as a group. And to understand the common culture that we have, and that's actually the dominant culture and very dominant in business, especially in a construction company where it's mostly white men. that was critical for me to understand what they were teaching us the next day, a few days about other groups. And I got very excited by it. Or for one thing, it was kind of embarrassing that I wasn't able to see it, but that's what's so difficult about it. It's the water we swim in. And when people try to convince us, we don't feel racist, we don't feel sexist, and that's somebody else's issue, not mine. And so I saw the opportunity, and I came back to our office. I was really excited, and I got met with some, challenges. I mean, people didn't, what are we doing focusing on diversity and inclusion? We have all these problems. And I said, yeah, I know that, but this culture is going to help us solve those problems. And it was hard. It was a hard road, for sure. After a couple of years, I decided to put myself out there. I did an impassioned speech to our company to open their hearts and minds, to see things that aren't there, to be curious, and to give people space. And that was part of our theme for the year, our strategic theme, which was inclusion. We felt like if we were going to be successful at adding diversity, we had to create an inclusive atmosphere first. And that really seemed to get the ball rolling. We came up with some strategies, and we became a much more inclusive place. And really, the White Man's Caucus was a huge part of that. We sent some more executives to the conference, and they came back energized. So I had some partners in the company. So it's important as a leader to, one, show a visible commitment to diversity and inclusion, display some humility, be aware of your bias. You just don't have a chance if you're not aware. Be curious about others. Cultural awareness is key, and to be collaborative. And one thing we learned about our culture is we're rugged individuals. We like to go it alone, and it's not natural for us to bring people in and help us out. We created an amazing strategy, and there's no way I could have come up with it on my own. As we created this culture, it helped get people sharing and opening up, and the results were tremendous for our company. I want to share a survey that we did with Crane's Cool Places to Work. This was also part of our strategy to get some recognition for what we were doing, and that was going to be, down the road. So we scored 96% overall, but our engagement score was 99%. I had no idea we could ever score that high given the results we'd had before. And if you look over to the right, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, our engagement scores for women and for African Americans was 100%. So to these questions you see on the other side, overall, I'm very satisfied with my employer. I look forward to coming to work each day. I'll recommend our products and services to a customer. Out of 151 people, every single person said yes. To me, that's just extraordinary. And why that's important is because companies with high engagement scores outperform the competition by 147%. We have our client satisfaction scores are going through the roof at 95, is as high as they've ever been. And we finished at the top of all the construction companies in the Cool Places to Work program. One of the difficult things I think for people to understand about diversity and inclusion is how it's going to impact their bottom line. Since we started this journey, our company has grown by 2.5 times. That's over a 3.5-year period. Our bottom line has grown tremendously. It's improved my relationships, the richness of my life. And it's not only the right thing to do, it's critical for your business. And I'm not paid by the White Man's Caucus or White Men as Full Diversity Partners. There's other programs out there, but the critical part of it was for me to understand the culture, and it's made a tremendous difference. It was easily the best investment our firm's ever made. And if you are interested in learning more about it, there's a book called 4 Days to Change by Michael Welp. It is packed with great lessons as well as leadership lessons. So if anybody has any, would like to contact me after this and talk about it, I'm look forward to helping you with it. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Kim Waller, and Sam, what an extraordinary testimonial and case study that you provided to the audience on why diversity and inclusion matters. Really, you stole some of my talking points, but the work that I do at Willis Towers Watson is really consulting clients like Sam's company on why diversity and inclusion matters. And he gave a stellar example of why. But taking a step back, one of the underpinnings, Sam talked about the fact that he came from a small town. I came and grew up in a suburb of Minnesota. And I grew up in a suburb of Minnesota in the 70s when the world looked very different. As an African-American female in Bloomington, Minnesota in the 70s, there were very few people that looked like me. While it wasn't a small rural town, it was still typical of what America looked like at that time in many geographies. And when you look at a map of what the US looked like in the 70s, the US was 88% white and only 12% minority. Then we fast forward to projections by the census that say for 2018, we were 40% minority and 60% white. Fast forward a little bit further, right, 2045, and many of you have probably heard these numbers. The projection is that by 2045, we will be majority non-white within the US. And so just the workforce that we have, even if you said, I don't care anything about diversity and inclusion, as somebody said to Sam, why are we even focusing on diversity and inclusion? Even if that was your perspective, your labor pool is different than what it was perhaps if you were 50 plus back in the day when the world looked different. Not only does the world look different in terms of our labor pool and will it look increasingly more diverse, the expectations of talent today are different, whether it's based upon age, whether gender, race, ethnicity, LGBTQ status. We have a very different world when we start to think about the talent that we have an opportunity to bring into our companies to do the work that we are all challenged to do. And so what that requires is that we as leaders now show up differently, right? It is important to be an inclusive leader. As Sam said, their engagement scores and their performance went out the roof as he demonstrated the tenets of what it means to be an inclusive leader. Sometimes I get the question asked, well, if I'm a white male, all this talk about diversity and inclusion, do I get left out? And what we say is no, because if you truly have an inclusive culture, everyone gets an opportunity to bring their authentic self. We are not all just one dimension, right? As you see me on the screen, I'm a Black female, but I'm much more than just that. And inclusive leaders have the ability to tap into their talent at multiple levels and help them to bring their authentic self. Our research shows that to create a culture of inclusivity and belonging, that people in general want really some of the tenets of the same things. They want to belong, to know that they can fit in the organization while being who they are as individuals. They want opportunity. Everybody wants opportunity. They want an opportunity to benefit from hard work and their efforts within an organization that we in our country and we as individuals and leaders believe in meritocracy. They want that for there to be a level playing field where everyone can bring their best talents and benefit. And they want a culture of inclusion. And so the power of diversity and inclusion, if this is done and when you take the time to do the work that Sam gave an example of, that's an example, but do your own exploration of what does it mean to be able to embrace people from all different walks of life in the context of who and what your company is important. The other thing that I will say, in addition to being able to compete for and bring in top talent into your organization so that you can meet your organizational results, it does benefit everybody. Everybody typically on top teams, top diverse teams, perform at a higher level. Company results are at a higher level. And then from a well-being, all of us have lived through COVID and understand the importance now more than ever of what well-being means and mental health. That if you have an organization that, let's say you've said, look, we're going to ignore all this stuff about diversity and inclusion, and we really don't care. We just want people to work. Whether people feel included or not is really not my business. There's a ripple effect, the negative impact of what that does for everyone, not only the people that are diverse, but everyone, are seen in unfortunate statistics that say, as an example, white males have the highest rate of suicide, right? And as a construction industry, in the construction industry, there's work that's being done, because if we create inclusive cultures where everyone can bring their authentic self to work and create a sense of safety, that should someone be in trouble, there's an avenue for them to express it and to get the kind of help that they need, because you created a positive, inclusive culture. So again, Sam gave a great kickoff as to why this matters to the industry. And I'm going to now hand it over to Henry.
Thanks, Kim. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So one of the things I wanted to share is I get to work with Sam and Kim on our steering committee. So you can just, the touch of what the value that they bring to our team is so important, and the different perspectives that they bring helps challenge us, all of us to be better and to do better. And so very happy to be here today and share a few things with you. One of the things I look at, I'm going to do about maybe 5 or 6 slides and kind of have a conversation, and thinking about the topic, the value of that leadership commitment, to stop there. It's so important that we have the top-down approach, that the people who actually influence the companies, who make the decisions, as Sam did, really have a tremendous splash, a really huge impact in what happens next to all the people that work for those companies. So I'm going to breeze through a couple of these things. We talk about the construction industry as a whole. There's a lot of broken parts, right? There's a lot of stuff that we can go into and talk about. Kim mentioned suicide, and it is true, and it's a very unfortunate. Safety in general, people still die every day in our fields. So we all these different things going on. So we take that and you compound that with what we're talking about today, which makes it such a more important topic and even more difficult to have. Because in general, I'll talk about these couple bullet points here, is that we have an industry where we don't communicate very well. We don't recognize people for doing good things, but we will remind them what they didn't do right. That's just what we do. We joke about things like, hey, when's the last time you got a compliment for doing something good? We rarely get that, but we will always be reminded when we miss something, we didn't do something correctly. That's what we're used to. We've kind of got thick skin because of that. We talk about work-life balance. That's not something you typically include the construction industry with. We're talking about everybody else typically. And my perspective is I came from the trades. I'm a pre-construction exec now, but I spent the majority of my career as a sheet metal worker in the field and worked my way up through that. So I get it, been there. Some of the things that we actually ended up facing in our industry are people who are isolated. We deal with stigmas of dealing with mental health. Like, we're not going to talk about that. We've got pressure all the time on finishing in deadlines, and some of us, go through in and out of jobs, and you're not getting consistent pay. And then the conditions, I could say in the last maybe 3 years, 5, 10 years, maybe I'll give it that, where now there's a consideration for construction workers to wash their hands before they actually, eat lunch, or after they, handle their business. They can actually go in and wash their hands. That's not something that I was accustomed to when I was coming up in the trade. So again, you considering all these factors that we're talking about, and I'll kind of explain how does that tie into what we're talking about today. So thinking about your workforce, thinking about the people that you see every day, and I thought this was just a perfect caption, and I looked at it a few times, and every time I looked at it, I thought about something different. I didn't even think about the white and the black face that exists there, but you have people putting on a face every day because they can't show up in the way who they really are. They have to check in with themselves and say, who do I need to be today to survive? How do I show up at work so I can make sure that I'm not ridiculed, that I can try to do the best work that I can, and get people off my back? How do I have to fit in and assimilate? I just can't be me. And those are realities that face your companies every day. And if you're unaware, then you can't do anything about it. So that value that you bring, it's showing up for this person right here, or others that represent this person. We don't want people that lack authenticity. We don't want people to feel powerless and underappreciated, and not being able to show up and be present. And because every day our work suffers, and if our work suffers every day, then our bottom line suffers. And so there's this whole ripple effect, as was mentioned earlier. And then we definitely deal with increased injuries. We talk about safety in the job sites, and just the work environment in general, where if you're inattentive, if you're preoccupied, you're more susceptible to injury, right? And so those types of things, you showing up, not showing up in your real self, preoccupied with pressure from getting these deadlines done, and then dealing with just the normal construction issues every day that I mentioned. So how do we change the culture, and what can we do? I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth on the next slide about the Culture of Care campaign. And also there's a racism toolbox talks that AGC has on the website. And it gives you tools on how you can just deal with some everyday issues and help your teams learn to be allies for people. Everything doesn't have to be an HR situation where you got to stop the job site. Sometimes a person can just go in there and advocate and just solve a situation in a way that just saves that individual from what they're facing, in a way that doesn't have to put the spotlight on them. There are things that you can do and conversations that you can have and empower your people to be comfortable to do those types of things. We want to lead by example, right? So got to get involved. And that's for the leadership here. You got to get involved. It can't be a mandate. It can't be an email that you send from your office. You have to get involved. You have to get engaged, roll up your sleeves, and be willing to become a part of whatever is happening in the flow of that culture change. One of the things I'd like to say about culture is that I got this definition from Rex Miller, and he says that it's what the people do when the authority leaves the room. So you can have a billboard, you can have a sign in your office, at the job site about what kind of company you are, but when the person with authority leaves, if that doesn't reflect, then somebody's not really sure about who they really are. So you have to really think about that. What does your culture really look like every day when there's no one there in charge, essentially? Do we function like we say we do? And that's something for you to evaluate. It's not just mandates, because if you just mandate and leave, it equals failure. If you refuse to do anything, if silence equals failure. And the one thing that we have to do is get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. I don't think, even myself as a Black man working in D&I with AGC, it's uncomfortable for me at times. And I say, if it's not, I'm probably not doing the right thing. I'm probably not having the right conversations because we haven't arrived yet. So there is going to be a level of uncomfortness that I just have to accept. And no disrespect to anyone, we work together well, but we challenge each other. We don't always agree. We have different experiences that we have to bring to the table in order for us to get anything done. Or we just can play kumbaya and act like we're all okay, and we're not. And we have people who continue to wear masks and suffer. So we want to make sure, additionally, that our leaders that are out there, they represent us and our company values. And if they don't, we need to think about what we should do next. So the culture of care, this is an acronym. So it's we want to commit, we want to attract, we want to retain, and we want to empower. We want to make sure that that the people that work for you understand what it means to have an inclusive environment. And what the culture of care is about is it's a position that you take as whether it's a company or it's a project site or even an individual pledge, where you're going to commit to these things. You're going to make a stance that our people matter. We're going to help drive this initiative or this campaign to bring enlighten our people and empower our people to do the right things. So I apologize for the slides not advancing, but that's my presentation for today. So thank you for your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. All three of you, Sam, Kim, and Henry, we have a few questions for everyone and have a few minutes here left to go. Again, everyone, we're going to be sharing recordings of all of the talks today. I know we were having some technical issues earlier where others weren't able to see the start of Joe's talk. So we'll have full recordings for everything. Apologies for that. And we will be sure to get you Henry's slides as well. Let's jump into these questions. Open jump ball here, if you will. For those of you, first question is for those who have already started to build programs similar to what was shared today, what's something additional that they may not have thought of that could continue to help build equity in their firms or organizations? Anyone want to take that one?
I'll start, and Sam and Henry, please join. But one of the things that we're seeing for companies that are already along their journey and have already started programs and initiatives, if you haven't started to think about through the lens of equity, your benefit programs, the things that you have in place to support your talent, then we're seeing companies do that, and they're doing it thinking about how do their benefit plans meet the needs of the diversity of their population, of their employees. Not everyone, while the plans may be standard, how you communicate the benefits to the different demographics can and should be new and fresh and different. You know, we are now in a stage where we can have at our fingertips through our phones or our Fitbits or Apple phones all kinds of data on our health and well-being. And so employees are now looking for differentiated, targeted strategies that say, you understand who I am and that you're not just communicating the plans, if you will, or the health and welfare plans through one lens that assume everyone is married, living in the suburbs with 3 kids.
Great. Here's another question that we had. And Sam, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but how do you address pushback with employees who may be resistant to a diversity program?
That's kind of a barrier for a lot of people. They're worried that their customers or the people in their organization are going to push back. And that did happen, and it does. But as we created this atmosphere, we did some things like things that surprised me. We did get to know you presentations. So we have these group meetings, and at each meeting, 2 or 3 people will do a slideshow and talk about their personal life and their journey, and it helps people open up. So as the inclusive culture we brought that first, and I think that's critical. As people start to show up at work and step out of their box that Henry talked about, white guys aren't also terribly comfortable in a work environment either, because we're kind of kept in this box. And when you can step out of that and be your whole self, and then realize that as we do this, you're benefiting from it personally, and nobody's taking anything from you. And then your relationships with women and people of color in the company start to improve. And as they feel that the leader in the company is putting themselves out there and looking out for them, and that starts to permeate through the organization. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a journey. And so I would say, don't fear it. Create an inclusive atmosphere first.
Great. Another question. What are some ways to promote conversations and practices pertaining to diversity in a small business? And what's one small action that promotes a huge shift in company culture?
Well, I'd say that, and everyone can jump in on this, but I think about the toolbox talks that I mentioned earlier that you can find on AGC's website. Because we don't always know how do we start these conversations. They're very provocative. Again, they can be very uncomfortable. And so there's some basic tools there that give scenarios that are every day and give some ideas of what you can say, how you approach, what you shouldn't say, and maybe what the benefits could be out of this conversation. So it kind of gives you some tips. It's just like having a toolbox talk and talking about safety and how you're going to address certain issues, or doing a pre-task plan about how you're going to address your work for the day. It's the same kind of concept. And so you want to get people that can identify with those issues and help you cultivate the conversation, or even create some of the content if you don't use the toolbox talks. Get people who are relevant, who are part of it, and they can help you kind of navigate through some of the difficulties, so you're not creating something that doesn't resonate with people.
That's great.
From my experience, if you aren't totally committed and you don't really understand what you're trying to achieve, and you don't understand the cultural differences and you don't understand your own culture, it's very difficult. It's a major barrier to trying to create an inclusive culture. So if you don't feel that in your heart, you need to explore that. You need to get some training. You need to have conversations with people. And, we have had some groups, like we have a women's group. So we have about 45 women that get together and they talk about issues within the company and how they can make the workplace better, how they can support one another. And we're looking to create more of those groups. But you really have to start with inclusive leadership, because people aren't going to buy it if you're not genuine and you don't truly believe it.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is when you think about inclusive leadership, think about what voices you bring to the table when you're making decisions and or you're at the job site, right? Who do you have as leaders? And think again about if there are people either that can be developed to be the voice of, and or even if you're in a brainstorming meeting or session or at a job site, who are you going to? And are you always going to the same people? Or is there an opportunity for you to encourage other voices to be heard? That simple act will help you as a leader and as an organization build muscle around what inclusivity looks like as it's embedded in how you do your work.
So Kim, I've got a question specifically for you. One of our attendees was asking if you could repeat the white minority percentages at the 3-year milestone numbers.
You know what? I will send it out, but I will, there's a continuum, but I'll send it out so that everybody can have access to it.
Okay, that's great.
Sure.
And then we have maybe one final question, unless I get another one that pops up here. How do you emphasize that diversity, equity, and inclusion are not the same thing, and that true commitment means more than just checking a box?
We have a great image. There's a really cool illustration of those different buckets. So there's definitely real messaging that can convey what that looks like, why it's different, and in a way that I believe resonates with people. I'm going to pull that up and I'll send it to you so that you can share that with your audience, because it's just like a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it just really gives a great example of the differences between DE&I and what it looks like in the real world, and how people are measured differently and viewed differently, and why one is not enough. You need all. So I'll definitely pull that up so that your audience can have that.
Yeah, and I'll throw out, right? You can be inclusive, but have a completely homogeneous team. Yes, you can, right? You can have an all white male team and be inclusive. You can be diverse, but not include everybody in it, right? You just have factions of people, right? You don't get the magic of diversity and inclusion from that. And equity is, how do you meet people and give them access to resources and support based upon where they're at, right? I may not need the same kind of support that Henry needs, or Henry may not need the same kind of support that Sam needs, or vice versa. But it's understanding the uniqueness of each of the individuals and who they are, and giving them the support, whatever that means, is where you provide equitable support to them, so that, again, what the goal is that you're optimizing performance for your teams, and you're allowing people to have satisfaction and bring their whole selves to work.
Henry, we got one more question in directed to you. The Culture of Care Pledge, is that an online, web, or social media initiative? And where can we find out more to learn and endorse?
Yeah, you can find that on AGC's website, or go to buildculture.com, and you can take the pledge there. I believe the last time we checked, I believe we were in the maybe close to 800 pledges. And I'm in California, and I know there are about 60 or 70 in California, but it's an amazing campaign that really helps people get involved in a very safe way, but a very deliberate way. And it helps to can shape the culture of a project site, a company, or again, even an individual. There are individual pledges that I didn't review, but if you go to the website, you can get all the information there, sign up and make that acknowledgement, and then begin to do the work on the job sites or your company. There's tools there that can help support and advocate how you do it, what it looks like, so you won't be doing it alone.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions that we have. Sam, Kim, and Henry, thank you so much for today's panel from HEC, and thank you for this thoughtful discussion.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
And again, one more final thank you to all of our presenters, our friend sponsor, WGI, our supporting sponsor, Barton Mallow, our presenting sponsor, Source Blue, a Turner construction company. We are so grateful for all of your support. Thank you. And of course, we're very appreciative of everyone for your time and attention today. And now we have one final treat. We have a 1-hour speed networking experience that will begin at 4 p.m. sharp Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time. Join this experience by simply clicking on the next session within the agenda, and you should automatically be taken there. You will have a chance to meet with up to 4 fellow attendees for 15 minutes, and at the end of that 15 minutes, you'll automatically be paired with another group of 4 attendees, and that'll keep going until 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there, and thanks so much for attending. Special thanks to everyone on the SMPS HQ staff. We can't do this without you. Thank you so much for your support today, and especially to Semra, who is behind the scenes as our magical wizard, as we like to say, making all of this work. My name is Josh Miles. It's been a pleasure serving you as your host today. Hope you can join us for the networking, and have a great day.